Welcome to Adventures in Solitaire. Today we'll be discussing Four Against Darkness. So, welcome to the Adventures in Solitaire review for Four Against Darkness. So, what is Four Against Darkness? Well, it says right here on the front of the cover of the book, it's a solitaire dungeon delving pen and paper game. But it's a lot more than that. When I think of Four Against Darkness, I'm reminded of my board game Dungeon Delves, except that imagine it takes a minute or two to set up or tear down, and that your board game has dozens of expansions ready to go. Um, the author makes it very clear, though, that this is not an RPG or a game book with choose your own adventure elements or complex prose. Um, I would argue that in some ways it offers more than most game books can. And I'd say with that, let's jump into the deep end here, into the universe that is Four Against Darkness. So, Four Against Darkness was initially released as a single book, and it quickly rose to become exceptionally popular in the solo gaming community. Um, for me, it was absolutely popular for me. It had to be because I have so much of their content, and as much as I say I have so much, it doesn't hardly. Well, I don't want to say it doesn't hardly touch, but I don't even think this is half of what they have available for additional content for their title. There are far too many books that extend these core rules for me to cover today's video. I will be covering those for what I have available or for what funds that I have to get those soon. So instead, we'll be focusing on the core rule book with concepts that the other books in the series can kind of combine to bring to the proverbial table there. So let's talk a little bit about the game system. Four Against Darkness will be using six-sided dice in the core game as your characters grow and you get new books. You may upgrade to like an eight-sided dice, or then eventually say a 10-sided dice. The leveling system that is in the core book allows you to get up to about level six. Each level will grant bonuses to your die rolls, and it'll increase your health by 1 point for each one of those levels. Some books will allow you to get past that level six. That's when you start seeing that increment for that die roll go up. So you can kind of get past that max level. And again, with the other books that they have up to a max level of 10 currently. There's been some discussion of them pushing this to level 12 with some upcoming content in the Four Against Darkness series here. So depending on which class you play, you'll have different bonuses for your level. And the game has a pretty good collection of fantasy characters or classes, if you will, that you can kind of choose from to start. It kind of fills those niches pretty well. Those characters are handled a little bit differently than you might expect it for your typical dungeon delve or role playing system. For example, an elf in this system is a class, not a race. So you're not going to have a situation where you're saying, okay, I'm going to be an elf barbarian. You're simply just an elf, and our barbarian is simply just a barbarian. So that is unique to this system, as far as I've seen there. Characters will have abilities that will differentiate them from other classes. The rogue, for example, will help like with traps and things that they might encounter. So having a balanced party is very helpful with the system. Some players though have kind of taken it on as a little bit of a badge of honor to create some really crazy party combinations, especially with some of the additional content here, because there's so many classes. I wouldn't even want to guess as to how many character classes there are out there, but they'll kind of take it as a badge of honor to make some of the craziest party combinations that they can to see just how long their party can go and what they can actually get accomplished, and that in itself can be pretty fun. So obviously with this type of game, Dungeon Delve, there's going to be a lot of combat. That's going to take up a lot of time there. And so combat, thankfully, in Four Against Darkness is handled pretty simply. It's handled by a roll of a six-sided die. Now, at higher levels, of course, you'll see like larger die, like say an eight-sided die, or maybe eventually a 10 or 12. But the general rule is that you're trying to meet or beat the enemy's level with a roll. So if you're fighting, like say, like a level 3 minion, then you're going to want to roll a 3 or above. And basically, all of your characters will take a turn rolling a single die, unless some skill or ability would say otherwise. And you're going to try and meet or beat that roll, or sorry, that level number with any modifiers, like for example, character levels or special abilities that you may have. Now, the monster also gets a chance to return and strike one of your characters. Some monsters may be able to strike more. There's some that have special abilities that things that you'd expect with a fantasy adventure or a role playing game, or even a board game. And so they get a chance to basically attack, but you don't roll for their attack. It's just assumed that they attack you and that they are, I guess, successful in some way. But what you do is you roll for defense. And on this one, instead of meeting or beating, you have to beat that number. So if they roll a 3, or sorry, if they're a level 3, then you need to be rolling a 4 or above, unlike to hit where it's a 3 or above. So, like a lot of games, enemies have the ability to drop treasure and things like that, depending on the enemy. Some enemies are actually pretty dastardly in that they'll have some really mean stuff. Like they'll steal your stuff sometimes, or maybe it's a type of like acidic monster, let's say, that will eat away at anything that you have that's made of a certain material. When you defeat an enemy, aside from collecting any loot that they may have, you have the chance to gain experience. And the way that works is there's basically roughly 3 classes. There's vermin, minions, and bosses. The bosses can be like, I think the weird monsters, which is another class, or kind of like bosses. But basically, if you kill 10, or you can kill any amount of vermin you want, but typically you're not going to get any experience from that. Minions, you have to kill 10 of them to get net what's would be considered like 1 experience. And then if you kill a boss or a weird monster, sorry, a weird monster, you get 2 experience. And that may sound like like it's not a lot, but it actually is quite a bit, because you only technically need like an experience to gain a level. And so what you're going to do is you're going to make what's called an experience roll. And at level 1, you need to roll better than 1. So on a 6-sided die, or the die type that your character currently is using. If you're a higher level, you may be rolling an 8-sided die. But for levels 1 through 5, you're going to be rolling a 6-sided die. And in order to gain a level, you would spend an experience point and you'd attempt to roll. And you'll roll. And as long as you get, from if you're level 1, a 2 or above, then you get to increase your level. By the time you hit level 5, the only way that you're going to level by spending an experience point, is that you need to roll a 6 on a 6-sided die. So it may take quite a few attempts. And this kind of simulates, and that may sound a little odd, but it actually does kind of simulate the difficulty to level as you progress through an adventure, or in a typical role playing game. We all know that the amount of experience you need typically goes up with that level. As you work your way through the dungeon, you will have the ability, like a lot of dungeon delves, to search a room. You'll also be able to find like a lot of unique treasures, whether that be from your victories with monsters, or that just be from your search rolls. You have the ability to find some really nice stuff. And again, with the expansions that are included with the game, it just really broadens that quite a bit. I did talk a little bit about expansions and quests, and I don't want to mislead. There are some ways to get like little small like mini quests. Like you can run into, say, a monster that will give you, or an event where you run into a character where they will give you some sort of objective to complete. So there is a chance that that may happen as well. So, as far as the end of the game that really doesn't have any real set end. It kind of ends when you feel like your party's kind of done what they can do. You can continue delving as long as you like, or as long as your party survives. The rules do allow for character replacement and even revival, and there's different ways to do that for the revival. Mapping in the system is handled by a random map generator, and you just kind of see it here. Additional maps are and different map types and even multi-level dungeons are handled in some of the later expansions, if you will. The game does have unique locations you can run into while exploring rooms and hallways in the dungeon. There's like unique events that you can have happen as well, and basically you'll continue to go through this dungeon until you finally find the boss of that dungeon, and then you'll kind of need to make your way back to the entrance to complete your current delve and be successful. Once you're done with that delve, you can look at purchasing additional items and things, kind of heal up and get ready for your next delve there. With the course rule set, there's no really any overall goal other than to beat that current boss. But later books, in the For Against Darkness universe, they can offer goals, objectives, campaigns, even alternate dimensions or domains for your characters to kind of test their skills and luck against. And they really open this up to a great degree. So about that additional content, I really want to stress this that there is over a whopping 30 books to add to the core rules. Um, so with those additional rules, depending on the book, comes additional classes, weapons, armor, items, addition of skills, higher character levels, quests, campaigns, new worlds to explore, and more. They even have some hex crawl elements going in for an overworld as well, if that's something that interests you, as well as some survival concepts such as food and starvation, things like that. So some closing thoughts here. I remember very vividly looking for a game that would have rules and gameplay that filled the void of somewhere right around, like, I don't know if anybody remembers Hero Quest, but filled somewhere between there and something that had a little bit more meat on its bones. And I have been looking for quite some time when I finally stumbled across this. I'm always taken aback by the sheer amount of content for the game that I have at my disposal to create and traverse a world of my own. I can freely add or remove whatever content I want. By the time I'm done with a party, it feels like I played through a lifetime of adventures with that party. I have played through so many dungeons and adventures with my fiance that I simply have lost count. I don't remember how many we've gone on. So many late nights and so many times with that we'd look up at that clock and we'd still, even though we knew we needed to get to bed, we'd still keep going. And she's not a big on fantasy, she's not big on role playing or board games or any of that, but this system pushed her and she just enjoyed that so much. This was a great gateway game for her, as well as it opened the doors for her for other opportunities when I was first introducing her into board gaming. So many countless nights with fantasy music in the background, pen and paper in hand. Those are the memories for me that I'm never going to forget. There's no way I can. They're very fond. Just talking about it, it makes me want to kind of jump in and start all over afresh. There are plenty of times where I want to pull out one of my other dungeon delving board games, and I honestly, I don't have the wherewithal to unpack them and store them because they can take like a couple of hours or 30 minutes at a minimum for a setup, and then I have hours of gameplay that I have to complete, and if I don't, then I have to leave it on the table, and then there's that problem to deal with. I don't have that problem here. Once I've got my characters created, it literally takes like a minute or two. That's it. Here's your paper from last night. Here's your pen, your dice. Let's continue on in the dungeon, or let's go on to the next quest. If you have an expansion that includes a quest. So For Against Darkness solves a lot of that board gaming setup and teardown and time frame for me. It masterfully fills that void. This is absolutely especially true when you take into account, and again, and I hate to keep reiterating here, but it's such a big deal. The huge trove of books that expand this base system. Basically, when I want a dungeon delve with a board game feel, and I want the ease of access and play, For Against Darkness really just always fills that void for me. It has a home where it belongs, in our room and on the bookshelf, ready to grab when the dungeon delving mood arrives. I highly recommend this to anybody looking for a good delve, and that was For Against Darkness. Thanks for watching.